Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone. And our topic for tonight is the crisis in Western Asia deepens. Yes, it does. So, I notice that Dee Pierce is here. Hello, Dee. And Lana Dell is also here and says, hi and happy Saturday, all. Lana shared to Facebook and Twitter X. Twitter X. Okay, and Dee says hello also, of course. I'm going to get right to the topic for tonight. I want to bring up a piece called Harris Comes Out of the Closet, on Israel. This is by Patrick Lawrence from October 24th, 2024 at the UN's Review. And there is the Vice President Harris, who is greeting Israeli President Herzog in 2024. It's photos from the Office of the President. It's in the public domain via Wikimedia Commons. Well, Kamala Harris has had her fun with all those, quote, progressive, unquote, voters in and at the edge of the Democratic Party who were much taken, or taken in, better put, as the vice president played the empathy card in her many statements of concern for the fate of the Palestinians of Gaza. Let us be clear, to borrow one of Harris's favorite locutions, if she wins on November 5th, and a Harris administration comes to be next January 20th, there will be no deviation whatsoever from the Biden regime's limitless, unconditional support for Zionist Israel's expanding campaigns of terror in West Asia. Well, I have a couple of things to say about that particular statement. She just made a campaign statement. Who knows whether she will feel the same way on January 20th? There's a lot of water under the bridge between now, and January 20th. There are people to talk to. And now, assuming she wins on November 5th, there are people to talk to. There are people to appoint. There are international events to come to terms with. It's a long time between now and January 20th. And she may feel differently come that time. She may even feel differently now. We honestly don't know how she feels. Of course, we can take her at her word. But she has an election to win. And that is what is reflected in what she says. We know this now, after months of Harris's, quote, strategic vagueness, unquote, how artful this New York Times phrase, an apologia for political deviousness in 2 words, because the Times has just published a remarkable piece of news analysis, quote unquote, making it clear indeed that Harris's campaign trail talk, quote, should not be confused with any willingness to break from U.S. foreign policy toward Israel as a presidential candidate, unquote. Wow, my mind tumbled instantly back to the leaked transcript of that six-figure speech Hillary Clinton gave to a room full of Wall Streeters during her 2016 campaign. I say one thing to the great broad masses out on the hustings, she told the assembled financiers, but pay no attention. I'm telling you here that we're in this together. Ah, yes. Politics in the land where all is artifice and nothing need be sincere. Well, yeah, that's the truth. If this news meant merely more of the same, it would be grim enough, given the spectacle of Israeli savagery that confronts us daily. But in my read, the Harris people have put us on notice that the U.S., should she emerge the victor in a few weeks, will back Israel as unequivocally as it does now, while the Zionist regime continues to ignore international law and escalate uh, across the region. Yes, she has put us on notice, but still, it's a long time between now and January 20th, and she may feel differently depending on what happens in the continuing confrontation in West Asia between the Iranians, and the Israelis. If the confrontation continues, a lot of water is going to flow under the bridge. She won't be making the decision between now and January 20th whether the U.S. Decides that they're going to thoroughly back the Israelis in their conflict with Iran. Whether that happens or not may depend on events. It may depend on how successful Iran is in its struggle against Israel. The initial indications over the weekend, of course, are that Iran is likely to be very successful against Israel. If it continues to be very successful, this may change the military evaluation of what it is possible for us to do between now and January 20th. And I dare say the military evaluation, in other words, the evaluation by the Defense Department and by Lord Austin, is likely to have an effect on Kamala's thinking when she takes over as president. Of course, Lloyd Austin will be offering to resign. And I suspect she's going to accept his resignation. She said as much already, but still, she'll be getting an evaluation from him in the process of her takeover, and that evaluation may greatly change her opinion, in my view. Let's go on with the article. Cases in point. Just in the past couple of weeks, the U.S. has bombed targets in Yemen, from which Houthis have been firing missiles into Israel, while on President Biden's orders, sending Israel a highly sophisticated missile defense system and 100 troops to operate it. There is only one conclusion to draw at this point. Support of this kind cannot continue without the U.S. taking on another war. And I agree. I certainly agree. Okay, and if President Biden doesn't take on another war, then there will be good reasons why he doesn't. He will be influenced by the Secretary of Defense, by the Pentagon. And if he makes a decision not to take on that other war, then when Kamala Harris gets into office, she will have the consequences of that decision to contend with, depending on what happens between now and January 20th. Her statement of unwavering support for Israel may have to contend with events between now and then, and with other statements that our decision makers in the Biden administration make. One can hope only that all those dreamers who dreamed Kamala Harris would bring something new to this U.S. finance spree of bombing and murder, who don't understand the dynamics of the American imperium's policy in West Asia, this is to say, have awakened none too gently from their slumber. Well, I have to say, I don't think I've been asleep at all, and I don't think I'm asleep now. I just think that whatever she has to say right now, before the end of the continuing confrontation between Iran and Israel, is subject to change depending on how that interaction goes forward. Let me get back to it. Go on with the article. Assiduously and cynically, Harris has cultivated delusory expectations at the left-hand end of the Democrats' garden ever since party elites and donors imposed her as the 2024 candidate last spring. Here she is, July 25th, as reported by NPR, after a meeting in Washington with Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's the prime minister. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think July 25th is not last spring, is it? What has happened in Gaza over the past 9 months is devastating. We cannot look away in the face of these tragedies. We cannot allow ourselves to become numb to the suffering, and I will not be silent. Well, certainly when she said that, I certainly don't believe that was a sincere statement. And here are Katie Rogers and Erica Green reporting in the New York Times just prior to a Harris campaign trip in Michigan last Friday, October 18th. Ms. Harris' office and campaign declined to give specifics for the Harris administration policy toward Israel and the war in Gaza would look like, in part because the conflict is too volatile to predict how it might be managed days from now, let alone months from now. But one senior U.S. official, speaking on the condition of anonymity to detail Ms. Harris's thinking, said that if she won the election and the war was still going on, her policy was not expected to change. Whoa, wait. Rogers and Green report that the strategically vague Kamala Harris cannot say what her Israel policy will be because in Gaza and beyond, biggest things in Gaza and beyond, are too dynamic, changing by the day, and then, quote, an unnamed U.S. official who can assure us our Israel policy will change no matter what happens one day to the next. You have to love the logic in this reporting. Keep this up, Ms. Rogers and Ms. Green. You could be on for a Pulitzer next spring. Here's another good earn. As an old farmer I know used to say from Rogers and Green, even if Ms. Harris were not aligned with Mr. Blinken's current approach, and her advisors stress that she is, She would not bow to political pressure and upend U.S. foreign policy at a precarious moment in the conflict just days before an election. Yes, that certainly might be true. She might not bow to political pressure and make any statements about a change in policy just days before an election. But then she's not the president, so she doesn't have to make any such statements just days before an election, does she? Say what? Says Patrick Lawrence. What does, quote, not bow to political pressure mean, unquote? This is the Times cotton wool English at its best or worst, and as so often it requires translation. In this case, the Harris administration will pay no more attention to popular opinion than the Biden regime has paid to date, because American foreign policy must not be subject to the will of the electorate. It does not matter, therefore, how many Americans want the U.S. to stop terrorist Israel's genocide. The horror show shall go on. Well, just as a matter of principle, I don't actually believe that either. If we could, let's say tomorrow, put 10 million people into the streets across the country asking the administration to change its policy, I think that would have an effect on American foreign policy just a few days before the election. Of course, this is a fantasy, because we're not going to have 10 million people going into the streets. And that's a result of all the propaganda the American people have been getting over years and years and years now concerning Iran, concerning Israel, concerning the Middle Eastern situation. It's that climate, that atmosphere, which is the underlying cause of why we continue with this particular horror show. We are in a loop, and the loop involves the people, the media, the administration, and it is not a loop that we can easily get out of. But maybe the loop can be broken by reality. Maybe the loop can be broken by the events of the confrontation between Iran, and Israel, and the course of those events, which may be quite devastating for Israel as we go forward. Keep the scorecard up to date. A CBS poll in June, the most recent I can find, indicated that 61% of those surveyed favored an arms embargo against Israel. This compares with 52% 3 months earlier, according to a poll commissioned in March by the Honorable People at the Center for Economic and Policy Research. But you don't need a weatherman to know which way the wind blows, not when the direction of the wind is of no account. Well, again, I have to say something about that. These are polls, and polls do not necessarily affect the Biden administration. But a poll is vastly different from an uprising of 10 million to 20 million people across the country, which is what I am postulating here. Now, again, I grant, we're not going to get the 10 to 20 million people across the country over the next, 10 days, until the election. That, is not going to happen. But once again, reality, when presented to the president, may still change our policy. It depends on the harshness of that particular reality. Katie Rogers and Erica Green give us a study in authorized propaganda, pointedly insistent as it is in 4 separate passages that Harris is fully committed to keeping the bombs and money flowing to apartheid Israel. We're left to wonder why a piece of this kind appears out of the blue, a coup de foudre, when read in the context of the Times coverage of Harris. And why now, given Harris's campaign's vulnerability to constituencies opposed to the Zionist state's savagery, chief among them Arab Americans in Michigan? Has Harris's rhetoric, hollow as it has been, nonetheless prompted a case of nerves among donors who support the Zionist cause? Has the Israel lobby put its foot down? Did the Netanyahu government signal enough already with the sympathy for Gazans as it makes us look bad? It is impossible to say. My best read is that the American public is being prepared for the U.S. to stay with, quote, the Jewish state, unquote, as the mess it makes grows more dangerous and yet more brutal. And I have to say, that's my best read of it also. I do not disagree with Patrick Lawrence here when it comes to the attempt to manipulate public opinion. That is certainly going on. But as I've said before, that still does not mean that the policy is going to stay the same between now and January 20th. If Harris is set to embrace her inheritance in West Asia from the Biden regime, just as her people now say, what is it Harris will face should the vice president become president? This is answerable in two words, very unfortunately. The man who leaves U.S. foreign policy in ruins across both oceans and the world in greater disorder and peril than it has been since 1945 will bequeath his successor if Harris so proves, another war. Yes, but the key line there is, if he leaves U.S. foreign policy in ruins across both oceans and the world in greater disorder and peril than it has since 1945, it will bequeath his successor, either Trump or Harris, another war. And then, of course, the question becomes, who do we want to manage this other war? Would we rather have Trump or would we rather have Harris? So there's the question. That is, if Biden makes the wrong decision, which will probably come to him over the next 2 weeks, and that decision will be, do we deny reality and continue to back the Israelis fully, or do we back off? Or perhaps I should say, or do we listen to Lloyd Austin and back off? We should have seen this coming, actually. The savagery in Gaza will go on until there's nothing left of it or its people. This is clear now that the Israelis have assassinated Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader, and escalate their assault on the Strip's remaining population. I have a question. Let's just say if the Iranians were to direct 2,000 of their ballistic missiles, at Israel and at the positions of the Israelis in the West Bank, would the Israelis still go about continuing their assault on the remaining population of the Strip? Or will they be too busy trying to put their own country back together again to do that? I ask that question. I think the answer is pretty obvious. The Pentagon positioned the Navy and a modest contingent of troops off the Lebanese coast shortly before the Israelis began their attacks on Lebanon. Secretary of State Blinken now talks openly of, quote, regime change, unquote. In Beirut, a coup, in plain English. There is nothing in this to suggest we can expect even a murmur of objection from the Harris White House as Israel proceeds with Netanyahu's seven-front war. Again, there's a lot of time between now and January 20th. Okay, a lot of things can happen. If the Iranians deliver those 2,000 ballistic missiles, will the Israelis continue their attacks on Lebanon? Will they have any airports left from which to launch these attacks? I don't think so. There won't be a Harris White House until January 20th. We have to keep that in mind.
We share.
And a lot can happen between now and January 20th. You have a question, honey?
Don't we share the blame for killing people?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We totally share the blame for killing people. More to the point, in my view, is how Lloyd Austin explained this move. Quote, this was a unique demonstration of the United States' ability to target facilities that our adversaries seek to keep out of reach, unquote. The defense secretary said, quote, no matter how deeply buried underground, hardened or fortified, unquote. If you do not read this as an aggressive warning to Iran, you cannot read. I agree. It is an aggressive warning to Iran. But of course, that doesn't mean that Lloyd Austin believes that we ought to target those facilities. Again, I raise the question. What happens if the Iranians tomorrow decide, to deliver those 2,000 missiles? By the way, they can deliver thousands of missiles for days on end. The Israeli air defense system will not survive. Israel will be naked to the Iranian attacks. Lloyd Austin can't do anything about that. It's not even a question of how deeply buried, underground, hardened, or fortified, because you're not attacking one place. These missile installations are all over Iran. You have to hit everything. I don't believe the U.S. itself has the missiles. I don't think it has the ordnance. It can be devastating for one place or two places or three places, but it cannot neutralize the capability of Iran to devastate Israel, which Iran can do in one night with conventional weapons. I know Lloyd Austin would say what he just said there. I would expect him to say that. He's not going to say publicly something else. But he might advise privately something else. He might advise that even if we can target facilities that our adversaries seek to keep out of reach, that in spite of that, he might argue or advise that we won't be able to do that quickly enough to protect Israel. The yet bigger news came a week earlier when the Pentagon confirmed President Biden had ordered it to send Israel one copy of its THAAD defense system along with 100 uniformed technicians to operate it. THAAD is Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. That's where the acronym comes from. As this Technology is commonly known as a highly advanced missile defense shield. Alert readers may recall Chinese freaked out some years ago when the South Koreans agreed, not without coercion, to accept THAAD systems on their soil. Now, something to say about THAAD systems. They've never been tested against hypersonic missiles. Their test will come if the Iranians should launch an attack, on Israel. It is said that they've now put in place not one copy, but two copies of THAAD systems inside of Israel. We know the way THAAD works is they need at least two missiles to knock down a single missile from the other side. Each THAAD system has 49 missiles. So, each system can knock out then exactly 48 of the incoming missiles, and that's even if they work against the hypersonic missiles. But if they're targeted with hypersonic missiles from the start, and they probably will be, they might be out of commission before they can fire their 49 available missiles. But even if they're completely successful, I point out, they can only get 48 of those missiles before they are useless. Okay, so alert readers may recall the Chinese freaked out some years ago. Sorry, I read that already. The Israelis, the Times of Israel, reported at the weekend have already asked for a second such system, just planning ahead. And I understand they've gotten a second such system now. Okay, which leaves us, I think, with only 4 left uh, for the mainland part of the USA. Now, I think that is pretty reckless. Trita Parsi, who directs the Quincy Institute in Washington, read the significance of this bit of American military largesse, as well as did anyone in an email note dated October 15th. By deploying the THAAD system to Israel, along with roughly 100 U.S. service members, Biden has taken a massive step toward pulling the U.S. into a larger regional war. Rather than deterring Iran, says Trita Parsi, Biden is reducing the risk and cost of widening the war to Israel while increasing the risk and cost to the U.S. Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Had Biden refrained from adding additional defensive capabilities to Israel after it needlessly intensified the conflict, the cost of escalation would have been higher for Israel, perhaps even prohibitive. Yes, Biden did a stupid, stupid thing. Israel would have thought twice, but because Israel knows that Biden will come to its defense every time, it ups the ante. Netanyahu has few reasons not to escalate, and with Biden's latest step, regional war may now have become inevitable. That's perhaps true. That's perhaps true. But the decision, the conscious decision, is still to be made by Biden that he will support offensive operations against Iran. I don't believe he's made that particular decision yet. Quote, inevitable, unquote, is just another word for a very great deal to lose as the unfunny farce of U.S.-Israeli relation proceeds, no matter who comes out the winner next month. Sending U.S. troops to Israel to run THAAD systems is to step straight into the trap Netanyahu has set, drawing the U.S. that much closer to direct involvement in the biggest of the Israeli leaders' fronts. I agree with that too. Friends I greatly respect, several of them say we have to look past Harris's shortcomings to keep things courteous. It all depends on who she names as her top advisors, this line of reasoning runs. I don't share that line, okay, of reasoning. I don't think it all depends. I think it partly depends, but not all depends. Going on, this is precisely what Harris will depend upon. This is why the prospect of a Harris presidency is so worrisome. History warns in no uncertain terms that these will be the same deep state ideologues, many of whom are committed to the Zionist cause, who have run foreign policy the whole of the post-Cold War era, if not longer. Yeah, this might happen. This might happen. But it hasn't happened, okay, as yet. And sometimes presidents surprise us with their appointments. Granted, the appointments are not always pleasant surprises, but the possibility is still there. And anyway, we're talking about something that will become operative on January 20th or a few days later. We're not talking about something that is operative between now and January 20th. In 1935, 89 years ago, W.E.B. Du Bois published a book called Black Reconstruction in America. Du Bois was concerned with African American contributions to the post-Civil War United States, but he took on much more than this before he was finished. In this noted work, he parsed 3 renderings of the modernizing U.S. In one, America would finally achieve a democracy expressed in its founding ideals. Well, we know that didn't happen. In another, he pictured an advanced industrial nation whose distinctions were its wealth and potency. And in the third of these 2 versions of America's destiny were imagined in combination. I guess we went the second route. This would be something new under the sun, an amalgam that would make America's history's truly great exception. Empire abroad, democracy at home, it has never been more than an impossible dream. Yeah, I couldn't agree more about that. An impossible dream. And we've been seeing that happen. The more we've gotten into empire abroad, the more our democracy has been compromised, especially when it comes to foreign policy. Foreign policy has more and more been taken out of the sphere of democracy here in the United States. Again, it has never been more than an impossible dream. Du Bois considered it, quote, the Kant of exceptionalism, unquote, in his biographer's phrase. This is the story of American politics as we have it in 2024. It is what Kamala Harris, and hardly is she alone in fairness, has on offer as she commits to a rogue client while pursuing the White House. It is what those among her supporters who think she can make any difference in West Asia or anywhere else for that matter dream about. I am dreaming about, but nothing. I am waiting and seeing. And I am also noting that waiting and seeing what she will do doesn't change the fact that whatever she will do with respect to supporting Israel, Donald J. Trump will do worse. So, I will take your comments now. Some comments. Did Jordan Sheridan ever respond to your email about the event? No, he did not. By the way, I saw the event today. It was a beautiful event, even though it's not on my schedule. But for this stream, I'm going to play at least a couple of speeches from the event when we get there, even though that's not on the schedule. After watching the event this afternoon, I thought it would be great to do some coverage of it. So I will now bring us to the second of my posts. I have 66 people here. That is good. But please share, like, and subscribe so we can have some more. This is another piece from the UN's Review. This is by Phil Giraldi, who is former CIA, if I recall correctly. And okay, the title of his post is Two Governments Linked by Lies and Bloodshed. The tagline is The United States can never tell the truth about Israel or enforce its own laws. Phil had this published on October 25th, 2024, yesterday. And there's a picture of little Blinky, Tony Blinken, shaking the hand of Netanyahu. As the United States national election draws ever nearer, the fringe stories that just might influence the outcome are increasing both in magnitude and in number. On Thursday, I participated in a fascinating talk sponsored by Washington's Committee for the Republic, which is a citizen-based, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization founded in 2003 that sponsors speakers monthly on challenges to the American Republic, including the military-industrial complex, too big to fail banks, campaign finance, and U.S. competitiveness. The featured speaker for the evening was Josh Paul, who, quote, resigned from the State Department on October 18, 2023, over disagreement with the Biden administration's unconditional surge of military equipment to Israel. The surge green-lighted Israel to equal or better the instruction of Thucydides, quote, the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. By the way, this is a maxim that applies to multipolar balance of power worlds, which is the type of world that we are entering more and more now. Josh is an insider's insider. He toiled in the State Department for more than 11 years, working as director in the Bureau of Political Military Affairs, which is responsible for U.S. security assistance and arms transfers. He also served in the Office of the Secretary of Defense, the U.S. Army Staff. Josh holds master's degrees from the universities of Georgetown and St. Andrews in Scotland. He is currently a non-resident fellow at the organization Democracy Now! For the Arab World, or DAWN, D-A-W-N, and a recipient of the 2023 Callaway Award for Civic Courage, unquote. Josh has cited the wisdom of George Washington's farewell address warning against excessive fondness for any one nation because a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enmities of the other, betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter without adequate inducement or justification. Pretty well sounds like our relationship with Israel, doesn't it? It leads also to concessions to the favorite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and a disposition to retaliate in the parties from whom equal privileges are withheld, and it gives to ambitious, corrupted, or deluded citizens. Certainly, we have all of that with respect to our relationship to Israel. All we have to do is remember the incident, of the USS Liberty in, I believe it was in 1967, when that ship, which was just observing the war on behalf of the United States, was attacked by the Israelis with a very high number of U.S. casualties. And we, because of our favoritism to Israel, we simply swallowed that, never demanded an accounting, and never demanded any compensation for the American citizens who lost their lives in that. All you have to do is consider that. And ever since then, we have swallowed all kinds of actions and insults from Israel, which we would not have suffered, and we have not suffered, from any other nation. One might immediately perceive George Washington very well described the possible consequences derived from the junior partnership with the United States find itself like into in its wag the dog, quote unquote, relationship with the state of Israel. The quote passionate attachment has been amply demonstrated over the past years of warfare in Gaza, which the U.S. has shamefully showered weapons and money on in Israel. It is openly carrying out highly visible war crimes against the Palestinians in an attempt to achieve something like complete removal or extermination of the Gazans. And here, I have to add that many commentators believe that the United States has signed on to the dream of the right wing Israelis for a greater Israel, extending from the Nile River to the Euphrates, and in the north, extending into Syria, swallowing Jordan completely, and Lebanon also completely, and even encompassing a small part of Turkey. There are commentators who believe that the Biden administration and Tony Blinken have bought into that conception as something we ought to try to help Israel to achieve. I don't share that view. I don't share that our decision makers, Tony Blinken the exception, but that our other decision makers share such a conception or think it is something we have to support. But we will go on. We will know soon whether the commentators who think our decision makers have bought off on that, in fact, have bought off on it. To my delight, going on with the article, Paul explained how policymaking with Israel as the most favored nation works in practice. The United States federal government ignores its own laws to include two amendments of the 1961 Foreign Aid Act, known as the Symington and Glenn Amendments. Senators Stuart Symington and John Glenn, two very famous senators in those years, which ban aid to clandestine nuclear powers. Israel has a secret nuclear weapons arsenal that is cleverly ignored through a policy of nuclear ambiguity by the U.S. federal government to allow the tribute, money payment, and other unilateral support to continue. In the Energy Department, the directive actually demands imprisonment for any federal official or contractor who even mentions that Israel might have a nuclear weapons arsenal. To sustain the nuclear ambiguity policy on Israel's weapons program, the government also uses deliberately improper classification to conceal what it is up to. In addition, there is the Leahy Law, which is almost completely ignored in its establishment of a process which on paper requires a careful examination of how and when transferred U.S. provided weapons are used, to include examination of possible, quote, gross violations of human rights, unquote. When that is the case, the sale or transfer of weapons is supposed to be denied. Israel, which is committing war crimes right out in the open that amount to a genocide, and which has senior government officials calling for extermination of Arabs, is uniquely exempt in practice from such examination, while Secretary of State Tony Blinken, otherwise known as Little Blinky, and his cast of spokesperson buffoons lie persistently to both the government itself and to the public. They lie every time when they claim that it has not been demonstrated that Israel is guilty of such crimes against humanity, nor even when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu openly mandates a near complete blockade of food and medicines, resulting in starvation and unneeded deaths. Paul cited an example of how the system works in practice, with Jewish state demanding weapons, often followed up with the Israeli embassy in Washington calling the White House a few hours later asking, quote, what is the holdup, unquote. The White House then sends word down to the Pentagon and State Department to, quote, get moving on it, unquote. All the countries seeking to purchase American weapons have to go through the vetting process and stand in line to wait their turn. Yes, I have to comment on the foregoing by saying that in the leaked the memorandum to the Five Eyes that we saw this past week, in that memorandum, the government of the United States acknowledged that it knows that Israel has atomic weapons. It's right there in the memorandum, which is obviously an official memorandum of the United States government going to the Five Eyes. In other words, the evidence is there that the 1961 Foreign Aid Act is being violated by the administration, and that the Energy Department, the directive demanding imprisonment for any federal official or contractor who even mentions that Israel might have a nuclear weapons arsenal, it was mentioned in that memorandum. It was mentioned. Everybody knows about it. They're all in wholesale violation of the law. If the Republicans had any gumption themselves, if they were not prisoners to the lobby, the Israel lobby, they would quickly seize on this to impeach and convict the President of the United States and remove him from office. But of course, they are as complicit in this genocide as the President, his major decision makers, and most of the people inside of the Democratic Party. Going on, Paul cited an example of how the system works in practice. Oh, sorry, I did this already. It seems that Israel always gets what it wants. There's been a great deal of speculation about the surprise decision by President Joe Biden to deploy in Israel a THAAD missile defense system, which will be manned by roughly 100 American soldiers on the ground. An advanced team of the soldiers and the battery itself are reported as having arrived in Israel shortly after the announcement of the deployment, and it turns out that a second battery was already in place in Israel. The commitment ultimately derives from the Biden regime's frequently repeated unconditional, quote, ironclad, unquote, pledge to defend Israel. But it interestingly creates a potential tripwire situation leading to an escalation of a much larger war if American soldiers should die in an Iranian or Hezbollah attack. Well, I don't have much to say about the tripwire aspect of it because there are American soldiers already in Israel in various advisory roles, and they are vulnerable to attack right now as we speak. In other words, having the 200 soldiers there is it's not a new situation. It's not much of a tripwire, even though it is true that if the Iranians attack, they're certainly going to target these THAAD missile defense systems with hypersonic missiles from the get-go. Going on, there's little to look for on the upside as the soldiers and equipment will be inside a nation which is neither an actual ally nor a friend, as its leader, Prime Minister Netanyahu, has demonstrated repeatedly over the past year in rebuffing the many proposals regarding mitigating the horror on display in Gaza put forward by Biden. There's also a political price to pay in terms of the U.S. relationship with nations in the Middle East and beyond, as the Jewish state is indubitably carrying out a genocide while apparently simultaneously seeking to go to war with all its neighbors to expand its territory to become Eretz, unquote, or quote, greater, unquote, Israel, and establish itself as the preeminent military power in the Middle East. But at the same time, Netanyahu knows that he needs an active role by the United States as his partner against major powers like Iran to accomplish that goal, which is perhaps why an insistent Israeli leadership somehow was able to pressure the White House into making a commitment of THAAD in spite of the potentially disastrous possible consequences. So the United States has absolutely nothing to gain by sending its batteries and soldiers to serve as potential targets in Israel, and much to lose. And there has been serious consideration of what the THAAD would be able to accomplish if it did wind up in the middle of a shooting war. Former CIA and State Department officer Larry Johnson, who we'll be hearing from very soon now, describes the THAAD projectile as, quote, a large bullet that is supposed to strike an inbound missile and break it up. It is a kinetic weapon. It does not explode, unquote. It is not clear why Israel, which claims to have the best air defense in the world, would want or need the THAAD, because the THAAD allows attacking missiles that are in the upper atmosphere or even space. That is why the other defense systems of Israel do not allow that. Okay, there's a special radar in THAAD, okay, as well, that nobody else has, that exceeds the capabilities of any other radar system in the world. There are problems with that. I've stated already some of them. Okay, each THAAD system's got only 49 missiles. It takes two of the missiles to strike, okay, an inbound missile. So even with two THAAD systems, it can only get 49 kills at best, and perhaps only 48 kills at best. And of course, these two THAAD systems will be facing perhaps 1,000, perhaps 2,000, perhaps more than that missiles coming in, from Iran. Beyond that, there is a logistical problem related to the system, which Johnson declares to be that, quote, as a tactical and strategic weapon, THAAD is a bust, unquote. There are only 9 THAAD launches in the entire world. Each launcher has mounted on it 8 missiles, which means if Iran fires 100 missiles, 84% of them will be safe from THAAD, even assuming that 100% of the THAAD projectiles from the two batteries score a direct hit. This is the first time I've encountered that. My previous information says that THAAD that each THAAD has mounted on it 49 missiles. So I don't know where that other comes in, but of course the problems with that are even greater if Larry is right, and there are only 8 missiles that are mounted on each of the THAADs. Of course, both could be right, okay, because one could mount 8 missiles on the THAAD, and then after you fire the 8, it could be possible, to immediately mount 8 more, and so on. So the information could be correct, that there are 49 missiles. They just can't be mounted on the THAAD at the same time. So, which means if Iran fires 100 missiles, 84% of them will be safe from THAAD, even assuming that 100% of the THAAD projectiles from the two batteries score a direct hit. Reloading the missile is also complicated. There is a supply problem. Lockheed Martin apparently built only 1,000 missiles for this system, which would mean that there will not be a lot of spare parts sitting around in a warehouse in Israel waiting to be sent to the front. Another point not to be ignored is each missile costs $12.6 million, not exactly cheap ammunition. There are a number of other factors that might be in play leading to the deployment. Johnson observes that the White House has been negotiating with Netanyahu over possible plans to attack Iran. He believes that it might be, quote, a tangible gesture of support for Israel by the Biden administration, which may be playing a desperation card in order to persuade Israel not to attack Iran, quote. Some observers note, however, that such a reckless plan relying on good decisions being made by a nuclear-armed Israel might go wrong in a number of ways and become a formula for initiating World War III, which would certainly kill millions of people. Yeah, I think that statement is absolutely right. It's absolutely silly to rely on good decisions, by Netanyahu, certainly. All the decisions he takes are extremely risky, and it's arguable that he will continue taking huge risks because he wants to start that third world war, which he thinks the United States would win. I think he's mistaken about that. I think both Israel and the United States would be destroyed in such a war. But apart from that, okay, the first attack by Israel on Iran uh, um, over the weekend, as we will see in just a few minutes, uh, had very unserious results. We'll get into how serious they were, as I said, in just a few minutes. But for now, let us say that attack was a big bust. Some observers note, however, that such a reckless plan relying on right. At the same time, it is useful to consider what might be achieved by the introduction of the battery and soldiers into an extremely volatile situation, as they alone could not deter or even significantly blunt a major Iranian attack. So what is the motive? I think the motive was just politics. And what other elements are playing into the decision? And how does the leak of a top secret code word protected U.S. government document exposing the Israeli secret nuclear arsenal and describing possible Israel preparations for a pending Israeli attack on Iran mean? Well, the speculation there is that it meant that it was leaked in order to ensure that the Israeli attack on Iran would fail, okay, as it has. Even though time is running out, the Washington Post is reporting Israel has already decided to attack military sites in Iran before the U.S. election, which of course is now a fait accompli. There's some discussion apparently still going on of whether targeting by Israel, possibly joined by the U.S., will include oil fields and refineries, as well as underground nuclear research sites. Having Washington as a partner in the enterprise is just what Netanyahu wants, as initiating a new conflict with Iran will invite Tehran's retaliation. I think more than invites such retaliation, guarantees such retaliation, possibly killing of the U.S. military personnel inside Israel. And bingo, the U.S. will be at war fighting for Israel. Well, again, not necessarily. I mean, we've lost our personnel as a result of direct action, okay, by Israel. That didn't mean that we went to war over it. And the next phrase, which is something Biden might actually be trying to avoid at least until the U.S. election is over. I think he probably is trying to avoid it still. That is why he, completely out of character, also warned Israel by way of a letter on October 13th he would give Israel 30 days to undo the blockade of food and medicine into Gaza, which is causing mass starvation on humanitarian grounds. He would consider an embargo on some arms being illegally provided to the Jewish state. It did not take much profound analysis of the statement to realize that 30 days will be after the U.S. election. No matter who wins, it will not be necessary to do anything to punish Israel. The statement is essentially phony, and it is all about the election. Maybe the placing of the THAADs was also essentially phony and all about the election. In fact, as a majority of Democratic Party voters oppose Biden-Kamala support of what Israel is doing to the Gazans and Lebanese, it might be intended to influence the outcome of a close election, which leaves us with the top secret document that allegedly exposes elements in the Israeli plan of attack. Who leaked it and why? U.S. officials are scrambling to determine how two leaked, highly classified documents containing potential Israeli plans to attack Iran got on the Telegram app. According to the New York Times, the documents were prepared, quote, in recent days, unquote, by the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, which analyzes information and images collected by America's fleet of spy satellites. There are several theories regarding these leaked reports. Trita Parsi, the executive vice president of the Quincy Institute for Responsible Statecraft, opines there are 5 plausible theories for what is behind the leak. The first theory posits an Iranian hacking of the servers of the U.S. intelligence services and leaking the document as part of their psychological warfare against Israel, suggesting they have learned Tel Aviv's top secret war plans, possibly delaying what is intended. Second theory is that a dissident within the U.S. government seeking to prevent or delay the war may have leaked it, but an initial internal investigation has reportedly already moved on to looking for possible outside government perpetrators, so that speculation might itself be a lie. Third, the Biden administration may have carried out the leak itself in order to delay the Israeli attack until after the election. Biden cannot say, quote, no to Israel, unquote, but he might well illegally expose even top secret intelligence with the aim of confusing preparations and delaying Israel's planned attack. I like this theory because it may actually have delayed Israel's planned attack by a few days, and now creates a situation where we are sitting with only 10 days left, and Iran has yet to retaliate towards Israel. If they decide to do a retaliation that is very light, in line with the Israeli attack on Iran, which accomplished extremely little, then certainly, if that gets to Biden, say 3 or 4 days from now, he can certainly delay the rest of the way until the election before he makes the decision as to whether to join Israel in a heavy attack on Iran. Fourth, the Israelis might have obtained or even fabricated the report and leaked it themselves with the objective of confusing Iran and inducing it to look for attackers in all the wrong places. And five, possibly a close American ally, a Five Eyes state, or a NATO ally with access to Five Eye intelligence might have leaked it, suggesting that a friendly country's government might be so frustrated with Biden's unwillingness to, quote, stop Netanyahu from starting the largest war in the Middle East since World War II that they're taking matters into their own hands to sabotage Netanyahu's escalation plan. As I say, I favor the third of these. I think it was the American administration who leaked it itself in order to delay the attack and in order perhaps to warn Israel, okay, that they had better comply with the warning of the administration to make this attack, okay, a light one, because the administration did not want to do anything before the election. I favor that theory. When it comes to THAADs or no THAADs or leaks of top secret intelligence, God bless you, honey. Democrats would like to do whatever it takes to establish a narrative that will help them stay in power. That would include creeping dangerously close to getting involved in what might develop into a major war by blindly adhering to the blandishments of one notably rogue nation to help destroy another nation that in no way threatens the United States. Then the White House and State Department will lie about it all, as will Israel, to cover up what the true intentions and motives of the various players were. That will be the sleight of hands that will be playing out in the next few days, whereas the truth might itself turn out to be a lie. This was from Phil Giraldi, Executive Director of the Council for the National Interest, a 501c3 tax-deductible educational foundation that seeks a more interest-based U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. The website is councilforthenationalinterest.org, and it's a Purcellville, Virginia address, which is fairly close to here. It must be, 20 miles away, 15 miles away, something like that. Here is Ashburn, Virginia. Okay, that's where I live. That's a very good piece, I think, by Phil Giraldi. I like the analysis for the most part, though I've given, of course, some comments, okay, and some criticisms of it. I will now take a further look at some of your comments. Solana says, oh, good, thanks. I didn't see anything about it elsewhere. Blinken shaking the hand of the monster, a.k.a. Netanyahu. Isn't it that system for ballistic missiles? It is for ballistic missiles. It's never been tested against any hypersonic missiles, but the theory of it suggests that it might be successful in attacking hypersonic missiles. Okay. However, the theory has not had any practice, and usually theories like this don't work. So I think it's unlikely that it's going to be effective against hypersonic missiles. Clancy York says, quality perspective. I believe the reason they want it is not to shoot stuff down, but for the far superior tracking radar it is equipped with can be integrated with existing Israeli air defense. That could very well be. Clancy York says, for superior tracking capabilities to what they have. If it was set up in Washington, D.C., you could track a basketball at 500 feet altitude in New Orleans. Yeah, I'd read that too. That 500 feet altitude, in New Orleans. Yeah. Good comments, Clancy. So, I've never seen Clancy before. Hi. Very nice to see you here. So, let's get on with the next one, which is This is a video that appeared very late last night, just after the attack on Iran was over.
This is a nail clipper that everyone is concerned about recently. Why? Because it is really different from ordinary.
This should force Israel to wake up a little bit and say, maybe we're not as good as we thought we were.
If you knew that.
Okay, this is a video that was done by Dialogue Works. Okay, the publisher and editor of Dialogue Works, okay, is Nima Al-Rashid, okay, who is a Brazilian citizen, okay, of Iranian origin, I guess from his last name, Al-Rashid, that, okay, he may be of a Kurdish origin, but that's just a guess on my part. Okay, it's a speculation. Anyway, he was calling people late last night in order to get some analysis on the program. Evidently, he made a call to Larry Wilkerson also, and they would be talking about these things. He made a call to Larry Wilkerson at 2 a.m., I guess. Okay, but Larry did not appear on the program. It was Larry Johnson, as opposed to Larry Wilkerson, okay, and Andre Martyanov, who were the two people he chose to spend time with last night. The time was very well spent. And we will play, not of course the whole thing, but we will play some part.
That $5 could help you kick Ted Cruz out of the Senate. Wouldn't it be the best $5 that you've ever spent?
Okay.
And it looks like they're using Uzis.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that summarizes it. Israel announced with great fanfare, we've launched. And so, people start scrambling to the social media. And, there's people on rooftops in Tehran looking out. No fires, no explosions, no plumes of smoke. Oh, they did hear explosions. Those were the initial reports. And then they said, oh, that must have been Russian air defense going off, which it was, Russian and Iranian air defense. And then showed the other video that just surfaced. And it sure looks like these are some Iranian air-launched ballistic missiles, cruise missile types, coming in. This is in another part of described, I think, as eastern Iran. And you can say, here comes a missile. Whoops, there goes a missile. Here comes some more. They're going. Oh, gone. So what happened? Israel's arrogant enough that it thought its missiles would penetrate Iranian airspace. And if these initial reports are true, and I put the caveat if, but it certainly appears that Russia helped Iran prepare for this, that the Russian air defense systems work spectacularly, that the Iranian air defense system work, and it looks like they shot down all, if not most, of the Iranian missiles. We've not seen any of the social media.
Israeli missiles.
The Israeli missiles. All these I countries are confusing me, but I think if that turns out to be the fact, I bet Russia's going to put its hand around Iran's shoulder and say, "Okay, big guy, you defeated the Israelis. You don't need to strike back.
Okay, so it did turn out to be the case. Confirmations earlier today indicated that very little damage was done. There were two fatalities 2 soldiers gave Iran who were killed, okay, in these attacks. Other than that, little serious damage, okay, was done. Okay, so what Larry was just suggesting was that the Russians would then try to restrain Iran by pointing to their success in terms of stopping the attack and saying, let's calm things down now and not have a general regional war. And so far, what we have, at least at this starting up this stream, we didn't have a retaliation by Iran. Okay, now there was retaliation by Hezbollah, but no retaliation by Iran. Okay, so it seems like the scenario Larry Johnson was sketching out was probably correct. I'm going to play a little bit more of this now.
Shown them in the last 25 days, you can penetrate them anytime you want, and you've just shown them that they can't touch you. So if this could be a good news moment.
Attention retirees, if you're willing to be at your computer from 9 a.m. to 10:45 a.m. on most.
Yeah. Andre, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's very easy to know what is happening there in terms of what the toolkit Israel uses. The toolkit is pretty limited, actually, unless we go talking about the intercontinental ballistic missile Jericho 3. It is intercontinental depending on the payload. But I mean, usually, most likely it was Jericho 2. It's a standard ballistic missile, so that easily interceptable with the more modern air defense systems. And they have this thing, at least that's the rumor, that it's called Popeye Turbo. Popeye itself is a cruise missile with a range of about 300 kilometers. There's no way Israel can touch Iran with this missile. They theoretically can get this Popeye, if it exists at all. I mean, and Israel loves to bluff about how great they are, how they develop all those super duper, wonder weapons and things of this nature. But even if they assume that it is true, so they need to get to about Erbil, to at least try to touch, let's say, Tehran suburbs. They can attack Tabriz, maybe, I don't know. But there is another thing, obviously, and that was the rumor which was circulating since 2015. I would say they allegedly have some cruise missile with a range of 1,500 kilometers, which is the submarine launched. That means it's very limited inventory there. They can launch probably 3-4 of them. And they have those German-built Dolphin submarines, so they can theoretically launch those. But those are subsonic, and in order for them to even reach Tehran, they need to be literally stuck near the shore of Israel, so they can go out to sea for 10 miles in order for them to have at least range. Anything which is going out there from the Eastern Mediterranean closer to more into their sea, it's not going to reach it. And then, of course, as everybody stated, and I was at it ad nauseam, as Larry correctly stated, if what we see and looks like nothing penetrated in Tehran, I mean, simply nothing exploded, everything was intercepted, evidently. It's Russia's ISAR, intelligence, surveillance, and recon. They had the early warning. And right now, it's just basically primarily PR, ballet. They try to kind of arrange things that next morning to say, "Ooh, we had 100, aircraft, among them F-35s," and think, okay, sure, yeah, whatever. And there will be brainwashed people, especially among Christian Zionists in United States. Yeah, 100 planes, yeah, 2,000-kilometer attack. Sure. Yeah, cutting edge F-35, yes, absolutely. So yeah, it's PR BS. We'll have to wait and see post-battle assessment, whatever penetrated. They probably got some leakers, that's.
Okay, so you see two things from that. First, okay, you get the indication of the knowledge of weapon systems, of Andrei Marchanov. He's one in this space. He's one of the leading people when it comes to understanding the weapon systems the various parties have. The Russians, the Iranians, the Israelis, the U.S. He's an expert on the weapon systems they can have and what they're likely to deploy. And the second point is you notice how cynical he is about the claim that Israel launched this attack, using 100 planes. He doesn't think 100 planes, got anywhere near Iran airspace. And today the Iranians announced that no Israeli planes actually penetrated the airspace of Iran. So you might say, so what caused those explosions we saw? And the answer could be, well, there were drones that were sent over that could have caused the explosions. Okay. Or there could have been some air-launched missiles that were sent into Iran but didn't involve any penetration, of Iranian airspace by the planes, that launched them. So that is possible. And of course, the third thing, that you can see is that Andre is contemptuous about the level of success which the Israelis had, as is Larry Johnson. They both are contemptuous. Okay, they think this attack was not serious, that it was some kind of joke.
But yeah, we don't know what they had. We know that Iran has its own pretty capable air defense systems, and then there is Russia, and so there we go.
It seems that they're trying to attack, Larry, military bases, no nuclear facilities, oil facilities, grid, power grids. And do you think that the latest visit of Antony Blinken was about this, the way that they're going to attack Iran?
Well, yeah, I mean that's what the Israelis were saying they're going to do. But I'm a big believer in social media and instant social media. So Israelis have cell phones. They take videos. Iranians have cell phones. You're Iranian. You got a cell phone? And you're able to take videos, right? Okay. So when these attacks are being launched, I don't care where you're launching them, there's always somebody with a cell phone. And they're cranking it out and they're taking the pictures just like we saw that one. And it's either going to show, as it did in the case of Israel, where missile after missile after missile was coming in and hitting the ground. Maybe 5% were intercepted, if that. Almost all of them got through. And that was the video evidence. That wasn't anybody saying, oh, this is what we accomplished. Just take the video evidence. And so if Israel had actually hit these targets, I'm sure there would be videos surfacing because Iran doesn't have that kind of control over people's social media yet, that they'd be posting it up and man, there'd be flames going and bombs going off. And, it looked like that scene from Leslie Nielsen's movie, Police Story. Nothing to see here, folks. Move along. But we didn't see that. So whatever Israel's intent was, I think their generals are sitting back, and I think the boys in the Pentagon, too, are going, oh, Jesus Christ. They stopped it. I mean, 100 planes and, at least 100 missiles or more, and they stopped it. That, I was extremely worried, and I just posted as well in my piece that I just put up, which was one reason I was late, conversation with Alistair Crook yesterday about options. What were we going to see with Iran and with Israel, the responses? And this is the happiest of outcomes, because if Iran comes out of this unscathed, they're not going to have an incentive to launch more missiles and inflict significant damage on Israel. Israel's going to escape a bullet this time.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you're
It's all
absolutely
about
right.
deterrent, Andre.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, no. I mean, they're probably those who.
Okay, so okay, there's much else in this video. Okay, so I commend it all to you. It's a terrific video. It came just after the attack was over. It's insightful from start to finish, both from Larry Johnson and Andrei Martyanov. Just fascinating to listen to them. Okay, but I've covered here the basics, the significance, okay, of the Israeli attack on Iran. It leaves Iran with a lot of options because there was almost no damage. So the political pressure on the Iranians to retaliate is not yet very great. There has been a testing of the air defense systems, okay, of Iraq. They have held up really, with the flying colors. The Israelis were totally unsuccessful in thinking about any future attempts to go at Iran. They have to take that into consideration. Now, what that will motivate them to do, I don't know. It could motivate them to immediately turn to a nuclear option. To send the Jericho 3s to Iran. But of course, it's also true that the Jericho 3s, intercontinental as they are, may still be very vulnerable to the S-400 systems the Russians have installed there. And if that's the case, nuclear attacks by the Israelis could fail. So I think the Israelis have to take that into consideration. What the United States has to take into consideration is that the air defenses of the Iranians were so good, and the Israelis, were not able to penetrate that. So, of course, the United States, is a different matter, but the air defense systems might be quite effective against the F-35s of the United States. Of course, what the United States would have to do to get at the nuclear capabilities of Iran, is bring in the bombers, from Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean, to do a little strategic bombing all over Iraq. So that is certainly a possibility, but the air defense systems of the Russians may well be effective against the strategic bombers. I mean, how high do the strategic bombers fly? 40,000 feet, 60,000 feet? I mean, what is it? The air defense systems can knock them down. How successful would the strategic bombers be? The Russians, are going to give the Iranians early warning. They would have that. They would be able to prepare for the attack of the strategic bombers. How well would the strategic bombers do? I'm not sure the United States wants to find out. I really do, not know about that. So, There are two other things I wanted to show you tonight. I have another comment from John B. I suspect the U.S. is reticent to expose the F-35 to a peer-powered defense system. F-35 failure in such a battle would be a severe blow to U.S. military confidence, a blow to be avoided. Yeah, I think so. But of course, the Israelis would send in, their own F-35 planes that they bought from the United States, and they would have to face the S-400s systems, as well. Uh, so there is that also. Now I wanted to show you something completely different. Specifically, there was a peace chorus and rally, in New York today. It was organized by Jose Vega and Diane Sarah. But Diane Sarah is running for the Senate. Okay, she's running on the ticket of the Independent LaRouche Party. They have a ballot line, and she is running. The incumbent is Gillibrand, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Diane Sarah is a compelling candidate against her. Of course, she doesn't have a lot of money, but she's very impressive. Jose Vega, is running for the House seat, currently held by Richie Torres, who is the largest of prostitutes when it comes to taking money from Israel. He's absolutely, totally bought by the lobby, the Israel lobby. Claims to be a progressive, but he is really totally corrupt. And Jose Vega is the guy who was made famous by his interventions going to town halls of Congress people, in particular AOC, and absolutely freezing her. And I believe she went to one of Bobby Kennedy's rallies or so, or he did, and greatly embarrassed Bobby Kennedy. But anyway, he's famous for his interventions at these meetings. He's done very good work in that respect. He's extremely bright, and highly charismatic. And he decided to run for Congress. And he and Diane, and the LaRouche Party decided to organize this peace chorus. It's called. And I'm going to play some of it for you. It was a peace chorus, and rally. It was indoors. I'm going to play a bit of it here. I'm going to roll it back. Little ways. It combined political speech and music. It was very moving. It lasted for roughly 3 hours and 15 minutes. I hope I hit some music here to show you the kind of thing that we had. Sorry about that. A little intervention with that ad. I'm trying to find some music for you here so you get the flavor.
When they had reached the other shore, they sang a song of triumph.
Okay, so that's enough to get the flavor of this. There were political speeches that were always followed by a musical intervention. Uh, there was a political speech, then some music, and then another political speech, okay, and some music, all through the 3 hours and 15 minutes. The music was invariably very touching, very somber, okay, but inclined to create a, an atmosphere of desire for peace. Okay. Let me see if I can get this. I did want to show you some of the speeches. Okay, let's stop it here and run it. See what we get.
Hey, so the other day I saw this video by this famous heart surgeon saying how incredible olive oil is.
I've struggled with it my entire life. It's like,
Okay, so now Scott Ritter, okay, is going to take the stage and speak. I did want to point out the title of the rally was "How a Peace Chorus Can Silence the Ghouls, okay, of War." Okay, so here's Scott. Each speech was fairly short. Scott gave a very interesting speech. I thought the best speech was actually the speech that was made uh, uh, by Larry Wilkerson. I'll get to that in just a few minutes. But Scott's speech was also quite moving.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor and privilege to be here with you today. I never would have thought that I'd be walking up on stage after hearing a chorus dedicated to being against the ghouls of war. It's a good thing to be against, by the way, but I'm sort of what they're singing against. If you take a look at my background, I am the living personification of a ghoul of war. That's who I am. I've struggled with it my entire life. It's like, like an addiction. And I admit, I'm addicted to war. I grew up with war. It was part of my adult life. That's how I defined myself for so many years. And it's an ingrained part of who I am, and it's something that I have to recognize as I deal with the world it is today. But I don't think Diane and Jose invited me up here to glorify war, just the opposite. But you can't appreciate peace unless you understand what the consequences of failing to achieve peace are. And the consequences of failing to achieve peace is war, is death, it's destruction. No, the song that should have brought me up here is the song that played in my mind when I went to war for my country. It was AC/DC, Thunderstruck. No offense, guys. You guys are awesome. But Thunderstruck is the song of war. It's a song I listened to. It came out in September 1990 as we were building up this move to go into the Middle East to take on Saddam Hussein for invading Kuwait. Thunderstruck. When I was assigned to the U.S. Central Command in Riyadh, one of the jobs I had was to hunt down Iraqi Scud missiles, and I would go down to the combat camera guys who had all the videotape of the F-15s, A-10s, F-16s as they were bombing suspected Scud sites. And I'd clip them together. I was a battle damage assessment officer at the time, but I'd play them to the soundtrack of Thunderstruck. It was pretty cool. Watch, because you see the video of the thing. And, in war, it's not like Hollywood, guys. As the plane's coming in on the target, the video's a little grainy. It's not very much in focus. The resolution isn't great, but you see a white blob down there, and you go, "Okay, that's it." And the weapon release, boom, Thunderstruck. It was awesome. It was so awesome that I, a Marine, couldn't stand being behind a desk the entire war. No, I had to get into it, guys. This was my moment in time. This is my Lieutenant Dan moment. But you know what I'm talking about. Forrest Gump, meant to die for your country. Here I was, safe behind the desk. All I had to do was look at pictures and play rock and roll music, and my war would go by. But no, I had to be in the middle of it because I was a Marine. And so I put in a request to go look at some of these destroyed sites. I said, we need to get the guy on the ground to look at it to see what it is we're destroying so we could determine if it's real or if it's not real. And if it's not real, why we're bombing it. If it's real, how can we bomb it better? And they agreed. They put me in touch with a SEAL team. You guys know SEALs, don't you? America's finest, or so they claim. As a Marine, I'll never give them credit for that. But these guys operate what are called fast attack vehicles. They would fly into there. Their job was a rescue pilot. But I wanted to get them to put me in so I could take a look at the debris. They were hesitant at first, but eventually I won them over. I was going to war, my lifelong dream. And we practiced for it. We did our missions. We trained up. And the night we were in isolation, and the night when we were going to launch, I'm going to war, we get the phone call. Stand down. Somebody take a look at one of those videos that I used to nominate the target. And they had higher resolution imagery look at it. That white blob on the ground that I was going to go and inspect whether or not it was destroyed missiles turned out to be a Bedouin tent. And all we were going to find inside was a family of about 16 to 20 Bedouin and their sheep. Thunderstruck. Now, I was disappointed, not for the reasons you might think I should be. Man, we killed some Bedouins. I was disappointed because I wasn't going to war. And I sat out that night staring up at the stars, feeling sorry for myself. I had an Australian liaison officer next to me. And we were staring up at it. It's a beautiful night. Stars are there. And I just started projecting myself out because I was really depressed. I was fundamentally depressed. I wasn't going to war. Thunderstruck. But as I pulled out, I realized, wait a minute, I sucked myself into the sky. You guys have heard about when the American astronauts went to the moon and they looked back on Earth and they saw the blue marble and they were just amazed. They had a whole new perspective. It's called the overview effect. Anybody that's gone to outer space has suffered the overview effect. I say suffered, I think it's a blessing because it's how you realize how fragile life is. And that night, I had the overview effect. I went up and I realized that the air base I was on was really just part of a big piece of desert. It was part of an even bigger piece of desert. There was part of a segment of a globe that was round, and the further out I got, the smaller the globe got. And the less significant this war became. Not just less significant, but irrelevant. And not just irrelevant, but totally unnecessary. Why the hell was I so focused on going out and killing Iraqi scuds? Life meant so much more. So much more. And I had one of those moments of clarity where I didn't want to go to war anymore. I wanted this war to be over. I wanted to go home. Next morning, I got up, knocked at my cubicle, and some guys with long hair, mustaches, said, "Hey, you the guy looking for scuds?" I said, "Yeah." They brought me in to a room. They showed me some videotape. I said, "My God, that's a scud decoy." They said, "Yes." I said, "Who did this?" They said, "We can't tell you, but come with us." And they introduced me to a new group of people who were out hunting scuds. Long story short is I got sent to a different base in Saudi Arabia, and now I'm going back to war. And I'm excited by it again. My God, I'm going to go to war. I get to do it. I get to live my lifelong dream. And I was very aggressive about this, too aggressive. General Schwarzkopf, who was the commander, found out that I was trying to be inserted into Western Iraq to capture this scud decoy and bring it back. And he had me arrested. And yeah, had me arrested and had me flown back to Riyadh where I was to stand charges. They dropped the charges because they realized I wasn't just a young Marine captain trying to go to war, as all young Marine captains are wont to do. But I think back, I fought real hard. I met with the Delta guys. Delta Force, I just gave you a secret here. And we planned the operation. I met with the Task Force 160 guys. They're the helicopter guys. We had the whole mission planned out. We're going to fly in. Delta was going to secure the LZ. I was going to go out, help strap it up, bring it up underneath a C8 or MH1, MH47, and we're going to fly it back out. Wow, thunderstruck. Later, a couple years, I was a UN weapons inspector in Iraq, and we were talking to the Iraqis responsible for Scud missiles and such. And I got to interview a general, it's more like an interrogation, a general and some of his officers. And we're talking about this period of time. And I mentioned that, we were actually going to capture one of these. And he said, really? Where? And I pointed on the map. He said, when were you going to do that? And I told him the date. And they brought out the document. They had prepared an ambush for us that night. Had we flown in that night, I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be dead because they were waiting for us. It was an act of God to get the general pissed off at me so much that he arrested me and canceled the mission. But had we gone forward with the mission, I'd be dead. And so a bunch of other Americans, thunderstruck. And I think back on that. Was it divine intervention? I don't know. But I do realize that that moment of overview, when I sat back and I looked at the world, I think maybe that opened the door into my black heart for somebody to look down and say, that's a soul that can be redeemed. That's a soul where there's some hope. That's a soul I can do something with. So he let me live. And ever since then, I've been trying to redeem my past, my dark past, thunderstruck. I'm here today because of people like Diane Sayre and Jose Vega, people like you who are here to listen to them, to support them, people like you who sing the songs of peace, people like all of us who cherish life. We should all experience the overview. Take a moment, sit back, look at the world from beyond and understand how fragile it is and how utterly important it is for all of us to work so hard with all of our might to preserve whatever power that may be above there has blessed us with enjoying. I want to thank you again for coming out today. Thank you for supporting Diane, for supporting Jose. Thank you for being who you are. Thank you for serving peace. Thunderstruck.
So that was a very personal speech by Scott, of course. And in its own way, okay, was moving. I thought you should have the flavor of that speech. Okay, then there was some music. Okay, for a few moments. And then Scott was followed by Larry Wilkerson. I hope I've got the time right on.
Every one of them.
I missed it by a little.
Excuse me, can you tell me where the train station is located?
Извините.
Okay, sorry about all the buffering. Sorry about the poor quality of the sound. Okay, now Larry is coming up. Larry's a little slow. He's about 80 years old.
We all need someone to handle the mic for us. I'm going to give you two parts. The first part is a little history, And the second part is screaming current events. History. There have been hundreds of empires in the 5,000 years of human history we know something about. In the 3,000 we know a great deal about, with approaching modernity teaching us even more. There have been hundreds. All of them are gone. Every one of them. Every single one of them. The Persian, the Eastern and Western Roman, the Mongol, the Mughal, the Ottoman, the Third Reich of Adolf Hitler, even the empire upon whom it was said the sun never set, the British Empire, gone. Look at Britain today. Washington's poodle, if that. The one distinguishing feature of the current empire, your empire, America, for that is surely what we are, is we invented the means that no other empire in human history has ever had at its beck and call to extinguish human life. If you saw the film Oppenheimer, you know how we did it. Pretty good film, pretty accurate film. You know how we did it. That alone makes us unique. Horribly unique, perhaps. Part two, the screamingly current events. 2 a.m. this morning, I get up, my phone just buzzed, I look at it, it's Nima Alkershid. You may know him from a show called Dialogue Works. He broadcasts from a little village in Brazil, south of Sao Paulo. He's Iranian by birth, but he's a Brazilian citizen now. And Dialogue Works is a pretty good show. Well, he's already working, and the time zone is the same for us and him. He's already working on the ongoing Israeli attack on Iran. Only he's working on it not from MSNBC or CNN or any polluted propagandistic organ in the American empire. He's working on it from the point of view of a journalist. And he's talking to people and he's talking to me, and we're texting back and forth, and I'm getting an update on the Israeli strike on Iran, which, of course, the whole world that knew anything about the whole world was waiting for, not eagerly, but certainly to see what would happen. What was happening, according to people on the ground in Tehran and people on the ground in Jordan and in Israel, primarily Tel Aviv, and people reporting on it who have essentially the right attitude about journalism, was that Israel was being defeated. I don't know if it was Russian S-400s or whatever, but I was hearing that what they were doing was not having much impact. Yeah, a few bombs went off, a few things, a few fires and so forth, but nothing of significance. I was even watching a video furnished me by one person who was in Tehran of Iranians out in the street filming with their cell phones. And yet, as the morning went on and I picked up the U.S. news, I saw the usual propaganda. That the attack had come off, that great damage had been done, 100 Israeli planes went out. At the same time, I was picking up some good information from Al Jazeera and others about how badly the Israelis are doing in Lebanon. Frankly, they're getting their rear end handed to them. They're losing more people probably than the IDF at wartime in a tight period has ever lost. Well, why do I connect these two now? And here's the sad part of my message. I connect them because that is the arena right now, and don't forget Ukraine because it's one of them too, but this is the premier arena right now for someone using a nuclear weapon. Because unlike what I was hoping that Israel would take what it's done and say it's over, and Iran would take what was done to it, which apparently was not all that bad, and say it's over. And this 11 times to the arena lawyer for Bibi Netanyahu, Tony Blinken, would actually succeed in doing something, and maybe we'd have a halt to this. But then as the train pulled into Moynihan, I started getting texts that were quoting what Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, and some of the others were saying, and quoting what some of the Iranians were saying. And it looks like we're off to the races again, that Iran is going to respond in a spectacular way, and that, of course, Israel will respond to that. This is, to me, an ineluctable chain to an eventual use of a nuclear weapon. If Ukraine is not, the Levant, the Middle East certainly is. This is a very dire moment because you have this situation that could go off at any second. And I have no doubt that Golda Meir's comment to a BBC reporter in 1972 was accurate when he asked her point blank if Israel were in existential duress, would it use a nuclear weapon? And she, without batting an eye, said yes. I have no doubt Bibi Netanyahu is a far worse scoundrel than Golda Meir was. So that's the second part of my story. What do we do about that? We need to get out there. We need to do everything we possibly can to let our government know that not only do we want both of these wars to stop, we definitely don't want a nuclear weapon to be used, and that we will do everything in our power, even though we are operating as Israel's lawyer, to stop that from happening. Thanks.
So I thought that was a terrifically relevant speech. It was quite clear. It was very serious, and it impressed upon everyone how dire the situation is, at this moment. Now, I still think, of course, myself that the Iranians had the option of waiting for a few days before they attack. Of course, since I'm doing this stream, I cannot know what's happening now. But if we actually get through this night and the Iranians do not attack, I think they may still wait a few days to reply. I'm going to see if I can get to Jose Vega's speech now.
With its 120 psi power, it can inflate all your tires on a single charge in just minutes.
Every war in my lifetime.
Okay,
I lied
this
about
is
Vietnam
Jim
through 40.
Dores. I'm going to skip Jimmy's. because I don't think his speech was as important as some of the others. And I'm going to try to find Jose Vega's. I'm not entirely sure.
My friends in a room.
There it is.
The love child of Charo and Michael Tracy's chest hair. Please welcome to the stage, Jose Vega.
Okay, so as I said before, Jose Vega is running for Congress in the New York 15th, which is the district right next to AOC's district. Currently, the incumbent is Richie Torres. But the sellout. Bonnie, please no.
I don't even know what to say to that. It's quite amazing that I could gather so many of my friends in a room to be here to all declare our independence. And I was thinking a lot about how I wanted to start what I have to say. And the first thing I want to do is I want to actually start by giving the biggest thanks to my dad, because my dad has been my number one supporter and biggest fan since I told him maybe about 10 years ago that I was thinking about getting into politics for the first time. I was about 15 years old, and he just said, you know what, son, do what you got to do. The thing about my dad is that my dad actually recently met Ray McGovern, and he told Ray McGovern something that I didn't even know. I knew my dad was drafted into the Salvadorian Civil War when he was young. I didn't know how young. He told Ray, yeah, I was 14 years old when I was illegally drafted into the Salvadorian Civil War. And so my dad was 14 years old. He was a child soldier, and his job was to go and kill the Contras, which was a U.S.-funded war on both sides. And my dad is just some 14-year-old kid who's caught up in a war that he has no idea about. He's just told he has to go and kill some people because they have different colored uniforms or bandanas and a different flag, and therefore it's his job to go and kill them. And all that changed after my dad left when he was about 16, 17 years old. He had to illegally jump the border. They wouldn't let him through because at the time they didn't believe that he was actually Salvadorian, because all Salvadorians are fair skinned, and my dad is my same shade of skin. And so they said, there's no way you're from El Salvador. We're not going to give you refugee status. So he had to come in the country illegally. My dad is an example of people around the world today who are brainwashed when they're young and told that there are people around the world who hate them. Now, thankfully today, my dad is actually a Christian who has done a lot of preaching now, and he preaches for peace, and he admires what I do in trying to call other people to stand up for peace and declare their independence. And so I just want to dedicate what I'm about to say to my dad. And that is the one person that I always neglect to thank in everything I do. And what is it that exactly I do and we do? See, people said, oh, people are here coming for you. No, Diane and I are coming for you. You're not coming here for us. We're coming here for you, because our job is to shock the consciousness and the conscience of Americans and of America. people may remember that when I confronted Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and she looked at me and she was frozen and she didn't really know what to say, and she said, "I can't hear you." And it took her 3 to 4 days to respond and say, actually, what they said, it doesn't matter because they're right-wing Trump supporters. They're part of this weird cult called the LaRouche people. They were going around something about eating babies or something 4 years ago. This is what she said. And yeah, we did do that. But and what we did to her was put her in a kind of crisis of faith in that moment where she knew she was wrong, and every fiber of her being was to stand with us, and she couldn't because she was a sellout. And what we are trying to do here, what we will do here, is we are not just going to do that to all the politicians. We're not just going to do that to our citizens and our fellow citizens. We are doing it to America as a whole, because we were founded on a principle of independence and freedom. We were founded on a principle of declaring our independence from oligarchy, from unjust and prejudice. And we were founded on a principle of freedom. And one of those foundational freedoms was our freedom of speech, to stand up against injustice and lies and to tell the truth when everyone tells you you are wrong. To look at authority in the face and say you are lying. That is the intervention principle, and it is our job and everybody's job who is listening to call upon the greater angels of your nature and of your country's history. Look at the great figures of history that define this nation, like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, Abraham Lincoln, President FDR, and President Kennedy. And we are to invoke them into the consciousness of America today, to remind people that America is not the British Empire. We are not citizens of Britain. We are not subjects. We are citizens, and with that, there is a responsibility to constantly declare your independence, to constantly fight for non-violence. But don't get it twisted. Non-violence is not the absence of war. Non-violence is perpetual, productive creativity. Non-violence is building enough housing so that no one has to go without a home at night. No one has to be hungry at night, so that everyone can develop themselves to their fullest capabilities, to be as creative as possible so that they can leave something behind for the next generations of people to come, long after they are dead, long after this earth that we love so much has been swallowed up in a ball by the sun, and we are living and spread out amongst galaxies across the cosmos. That's how far we have to think. What do I want a child born in the year 2099, when hopefully I'm in a wheelchair, not dead yet? But what do I want that child's life to look like from the day he is born to the day he is dead? And why do I want it to be infinitely better than anything I could have ever had? And why should I allow that child to make sure that he can make a child born in the year 2199's life infinitely better than his? That is what it means to be a human being, and that is what it means to be an American, but that is also what it means to be a world citizen. And you have to actively declare your independence. So next time you are in a room when someone is lying to you, when someone is telling you that war is peace, you have to stand up, look them in the face, and tell them you are wrong. And You are lying, and we are here to declare our independence.
Okay, so that guy is obviously the real deal. He's really, uh, he's really a wonderful young man. I know the odds are very, very long, and the days are few left, and a lot of people, have already voted. But it would be a wonderful thing, I think, okay, if he won. I'm going to go back a little, given what he said, and remind you of some earlier music. Okay, this is one of my all-time favorite songs. Okay, let's see if I can get it right here.
If you knew that $5 could help you kick Ted Cruz out of the Senate, wouldn't it be the best $5 that you've ever spent?
Remember what this is about. We have a good discussion. We enjoy ourselves. We meet other people. We exchange.
Don't have time for Garland Nixon, but his comments were pretty good too. Okay, let's see if I caught it yet. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with that and go to your comments. But what I'm going to say is the spirit of that song is the kind of spirit that motivated that speech by Jose Vega. So there are no more comments. Okay, so I am going to simply point out that we now await to see whether the Iranians will further reply to what the Israelis have done. If they don't, okay, if they wait, it is in the interests, okay, of Netanyahu that the Israelis attack again to try to motivate a retaliation by the Iranians. So over the next few days, if there's no reply by the Iranians, then I think the Israelis will attempt a second attack, okay, a much more serious one. But they have to think twice about that because their first attack was so unsuccessful. So we have to keep that in mind. The crisis is not over, okay, at this point. I don't think the United States has made its own decision as to whether to fully support the Israelis, okay, in offensive operations. We have to wait to see that. So I'll be picking up the thread of this on Tuesday, of course, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more news about this on Tuesday. I hope you all will take in the 3 hour and 15-minute stream from the rally. There were many other good speeches. Okay, there's also very good music. And the whole thing encourages action, motivates a desire for peace and action to try to have peace. And on that note, I'm going to leave you for tonight. Thank you all very much for coming. Attendance was very good tonight, and I was quite happy to see it. So thank you all again, and good night.